This is Modern Gaming Culture. This series will attempt to highlight the phenomenon of PC, console, and mobile gaming and bring to light all of its nominal aspects. Let's take a dive together into the world of modern gaming and take apart its structure. Now, here's your host, Rotimi Osagi. Alright, this is Modern Gaming Culture. This is episode 25. Modern Gaming Culture. This episode going to be continuing with unpacking uh, what I consider the times we living in, which is Internet Dark Age, and what has emerged, which I refer to as the Internet Bully. Um, so, given the description, right, for your consideration, um, and that's really what we're talking here, and really want to um, paint a picture, right, for um, you know of course, this is about, who I'm trying to reach, right? And so, you know, really want to emphasize, that, I'm not trying to, you know, have a heavy hand, right? When it comes to the people I'm trying to reach, right? Really trying to come forward with a lighthearted message, right? Um, so as to, really provide like a companionship, right? For those I'm trying to reach, right? Understanding, people in gaming culture, bust their day in out, bust their ass day in, day out, right? Um, and don't necessarily need a heavy hand, right? Um, and so, um, when it comes to really understanding sort of a lot of the issues when it comes to really, the dissemination of information these days, right? Um, you know, people really find themselves, wrestling with forces they can't really understand, right? Um, you know, with what I refer to as the internet censorship wave, right? Um, it's become much more difficult to really access, you know, valuable quality stream of information, right? Um, where you can really, um, you know, take apart, you know, the you know the the World Wide Web, right? The internet, right? Um, and you know, really have a um, very um, free flowing connection to the internet, right? Um, and so, it's very important to really be able to, um, you know, um, remain loyal to first principles, first and foremost, right? Um, because when it comes to something like censorship, right? That's really the open and volleys of war, essentially, right? Especially with censorship like this, right, where you really huddled people into what are called internet ghettos, right? And have really attempted to really cut off their connection to the real world, right? As much as you can, right? To the extent where you can't even necessarily, um, you know, divide people from the world to the extent where you can really inject something that can really take apart the fabric of society, right, at its core, right? Stuff like like they tried with so many ways, right? You know, because you had you know the early 2000s, right? Um, and then entering into 2010s when cell phone technology was getting a lot more powerful, right? You were getting right, essentially this sort of like era of misinformation, right? And so something where people were becoming very um, wary of the information they're receiving, right? Especially considering, you know, that people, right? Of course, I'm talking about the people I'm trying to reach, right? Where it's like, you know, um, not trying to really, hit people overhead, like a sledgehammer or anything like that, right? Just emphasizing, that, you know, um, this agenda is a lot deeper, right, than, um, you know, just, you know, my algorithm is, really messed up because of AI, right? This is something, where, people can really recognize something from a mile away, right? And so it's something that, people have to really respect, you know, um, their, you know, elders, right? Sorry, the diss track from Super Smash Bros. Just keep in mind, um, respect your elders. I forgot the guy's name, but um, yeah, right. And so it's something where you really have to respect your elders because the theme, right, of because for a lot of you guys, right, you guys have had, an iPhone 12 since you're like 3 years old, right? And so something that you've recognized, right, is that, um, your parents, just talk to you like normal people through the, cell phone, right, through text messages, etc., right? And, you know, somehow you've come to the conclusion that getting sucked in, right, is a bad idea, right? And so, again, right, this is what I was talking about last episode, right? About how you guys just don't get sucked in, right? And it's not a good habit at all, right? Again, right? Um, and so, you have to really be discerning when it comes to a lot of this stuff, right? Not necessarily, trying to take at first value, right? Things that, um, you have, right? You know, especially with the show, right? Like, you know, it's something where, you know, um, it's not a time where you can just, um, put up, you know, a web show, right, or an internet radio production, right, or what have you, right, um, and really not spruce it up, right, and expect to receive, right, um, you know, a huge following, right? And so, when it comes to stuff like really, putting the show together, etc., right? You know, I it's not something where I particularly strive to, sort of, cover up anything, right? I've talked about, how this show doesn't just represent me, just turn on my microphone, my webcam, right? And then just saying, first thing that comes to my mind, right? That this show represents months, of preparing for this show alone, right? And so it's something where I really respect, right? Um, the people I'm trying to reach, right? And so and how I talk about, how gaming culture is very spontaneous, right? And so it's not something where I really want to, err on the side of caution when it comes to a lot of this stuff, right? And so, you know, um, really just, um, powering through it, right? So, want to do a little housekeeping, right? Um, so, we have a lot of stuff in the pipeline, right? And so, I don't necessarily want to, um, you know, uh, take things too slowly, particularly, right? Um, you know, these things really need to be handled with care, right? And so, you know, um, I've done a few teasers, right? Like with, deck profile teasers, right? Really laying out, the format of how that would look, right? But again, with stuff like that, right? I don't want to necessarily, deck build, right? And um, put together, right, a deck profile series, right? Um, and not having my ducks in a row, right? And so with all that stuff, I want to just you know, be very careful, right? Um, really just, get that sorted out, right? And then, I'll deal with all that stuff, right? But again, right, even with the series, right, I feel like the series is very urgent, right? And so I really want to, um, progress the show, right? And still, you know, um, keep those channels open, right? Because once I get that all sorted out, I don't want to, revisit that stuff, right? And I'll be able to, you know, do the best I can with that, right? I really enjoy doing, the deck profile series, right? I feel like they're important too, right? And so, um, yeah, once I get that sorted out, then I'll be able to do that. With a lot of the stuff when it comes to you know um, opening channels up, right, for reach me and stuff like that. Um, you know, I want to really um, uh, take care of that stuff, right? Um, you know, uh, with a lot of this stuff, I feel like it's very important, right? To um, you know, take things lightly, right? Because especially with gaming culture, right, how spontaneous it can get, right? You have to really be respectful, right? Because especially with games like Pokemon, right? People can be very conniving, right? And so you have to really just kind of let the chips fall where they may, right, and hope for the best, right? Um, as opposed to really pulling the trigger, right, just for the sake of pulling the trigger, right? Um, you know, the best thing to do when it comes to really participating in the gaming arena with respect to Pokemon, for example, I would say is opening product without a doubt, right? Generally people like Pokemon for, um, you know, particular Pokemon they like, right? Or etc. Right? But for the most part, open product is just the best way to really dive in, right? Because again, with gaming culture, right, I've gotten into it a lot, right, about how spontaneous it can get, right, and so you have to really err on the side of caution when it comes to really examining the gaming arena, right? People really want what's best for you, right? But at the same time, you have to really, give people the respect they deserve, right? And so, um, that's generally, the safe way, right? To sort of examine, the uh, gaming arena, right? What I call connecting internet oversight, right? um, and really just kind of lift the chips forward and hope for the best, right? Um, and so um, I'm just gonna leave it there for the forward part of this episode, um, and to conclude, you know, um, kind of feel like didn't really segue too well into the topic this episode, right? But again, right, this is something that really needs a lot of unpacking. So I don't necessarily want to, throw breadcrumbs, right, so to speak. Really just take this topic, you know, um, right, and it'll take as long as it has to take, right, um, and that way, you can really get the fullness of what I'm trying to talk about, right? Leave no stone unturned, dot all my T's, cross all my I's, right? And yeah, right. So this has been Modern Gaming Culture. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you.